Welcome to Cordell and Cordell's Men's Divorce Podcast, moderated by Managing Partner and CEO Scott Trout, bringing you information for guys before, during, and after divorce, and everything related to family law. This podcast is not to be taken as legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established.
Welcome back to the Cordell and Cordell and Men's Divorce Podcast. I'm Scott Trout, CEO, and again, we're joined by one of the Cordell and Cordell attorneys up in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, Scott.
Thanks for joining. And so we continue to bring you information for guys before, during, and after divorce and topics that are relevant throughout this pandemic. It started, 20 months ago. It's crazy. And continue to bring you topics that I think are relevant and new. And today is no different. We're going to talk about relocation. And I think we were just talking off camera. I love this topic because I've actually taken one up to the Supreme Court of my state, Missouri, on relocation. It's relevant now more than ever, I think, when it relates to guys, in this job market. People are finding jobs and they're maybe relocating, and there's a lot of considerations that go into place for guys that have an order. And so let's talk about that, kind of the custody schedules. What is the first step that you should be looking at if it's either confronting you, there's an opportunity for you to relocate. And when I say relocate, especially in Missouri, and I'm not sure about Pennsylvania, but for us, even a relocation down the street triggers the relocation provision. Now, courts will look at it differently, but there's a very specific provision in all of the judgments that say, that you cannot relocate. And it doesn't say, so many miles necessarily. Some of them are very vague. So let's talk a little bit about that and what's their first step that they should be thinking about.
Exactly. And like you said, with everything opening back up with the pandemic, this is becoming more and more of an issue these days. And in Pennsylvania, what constitutes relocation, and is pretty ambiguous, is what negatively or significantly impacts the custody for the non-relocating party. So every judge, every county that I've come across has different scenarios. Some judges, I had one relocation case where the other party wanted to move 45 minutes away from Allentown to Kutztown.
Yep.
The other party did file relocation, which the judge, we had a candor conversation, and he said, yeah, I guess you should have filed, but I could see it not being relocation as well. And those parties were actually operating under a 50-50 schedule. And so, of course, if it was an every other weekend or something where our client had less time, it would have been that much less of a potential relocation, because the custody schedule does impact that. Because if it's still every other weekend and 45 minutes is not a big deal, but 50-50 could have greatly changed that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a huge point. I mean, like in St. Louis, there's the metro area. While St. Charles is kind of a suburb of St. Louis, maybe, 11 miles pre-COVID, it may take you an hour to get to a location just from traffic. Now, it's changed. I mean, that's got to weigh in on, especially as you say, let's take a look at the schedule. That's got to be the first priority of if it's equal, 50-50, week on, week off, or every other day. It's got to create an issue, especially if if they were in the same school district. I would imagine that'd be an issue.
School is absolutely a big factor. And in the case I was just talking about, that was our main issue of how to get about that. Because opposing party didn't necessarily want to stop 50-50. She had no problem with that as a parent. She wanted to relocate there for a job. So we needed to figure out school, because she was moving out of their current district, which was the main issue exactly of out of school district or not, which is another factor I've come across judges using as whether or not something constitutes relocation.
And we live in such a mobile society. I mean, I've been practicing almost 29 years. And I think when we first started, it maybe didn't come up as much. But in the latter half of, say, the last 15, I always see them come up in July or early August, right before we register people for school. You've got, parents are wanting to move. They want to upgrade a home. They want to move wherever, closer, getting out of a neighborhood. And that school issue becomes probably, as you suggest, probably one of the principal arguments about let's compare these two public schools or private schools, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And really getting experts to come in and say, this is one of the lowest school districts in the area. And that can, serve as a basis for fighting some of these relocations, I imagine.
Absolutely. And at least in Pennsylvania, some of the factors the court looks at, two of the biggest are, how is this going to impact the child's life in terms of education, stability? As you mentioned, if they're going from a fabulous school to one that's maybe not so great, the court's being less inclined to do that to the child is probably not the right way to put that. However, they're going to be less inclined to take that opportunity away from a child to be in a good school. However, vice versa, if they're going from a lesser known school district to a better one, that will help the relocation.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing we're looking at is this going to better the child's life?
Mm-hmm.
And all these
and that's the play, right?
Right.
You focus on the child, because I can tell you, oh my gosh, I think of all the cases that I've had. A lot of them dealt with the parent that says, well, I'm doing this for me and I'm moving. And the question was always, well, okay, are you getting a raise? No. Are you getting a promotion? No. Is it advancing your career? Well, no, it's lateral. Well, why are you moving? Oh, well, I just want to go try something new. And the judge is always, well, okay, we're not here about you. We're here about the child. And there have been cases when the judge posed to the mom and said, all right, you make a choice, job or child goes with dad. And they chose job, which was very interesting. But it's a great point when you think about what the court's going to look at, and that is the child, focusing on the child. Or, I mean, there are cases where I've had the custodial parent, or if it was 50-50, they got a really big promotion. It wasn't a voluntary transfer. The company said, look, take the job, move to Dallas, or you're fired, kind of thing, or you're laid off. And that's a different situation where it's not necessarily the child comes into play, but I don't know about Pennsylvania, but in those instances, the court will observe whether or not it improves the overall life of the family unit.
Correct. And one of the factors Pennsylvania does look at is, why is this party requesting the relocation? What brought this about? And like you said, if it's, look, my company gave me this big promotion, I didn't actively look for this, versus, like you were saying, I just kind of want to, or I've come across it a few times that there's a significant other in a different area that they want to go closer to. The court is less favorable upon that reasoning.
The favorite, my boyfriend's being transferred, so I want to go with him.
Exactly.
And he happens to have a couple felonies, but it's all good anyway.
Exactly. And that again ties into the best interest of the child of, well, how long are you even going to relocate? Is this relocation going to stick? Will you be there a year and then trying to move somewhere else? Things of that nature as well.
During the pandemic early on, and I want to say it was probably April or May, we had a virtual town hall where we talked about celebrities and how they were dealing with the pandemic. And I can't remember, I think it was an artist she relocated from California to Oklahoma during the pandemic. They were divorced, and both parents lived in California close to each other. And it became a big argument about the impact on the relationship with the other parent. Now, not only is the distance become a problem, but the prohibition on travel became even an issue. And I've had cases, and I think we have one now, where one parent's gone out of the country. And, that's even a whole nother level of how that impacts the relationship with the other parent. I mean, there are cases all over the country, and that some of them are disturbing. I know one out of New York that the judge said, virtual like this, that's significant and meaningful. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now that our world has changed, and now we're utilizing technology like this to take care of court matters, to do interviews, to engage with people. We used to, during the pandemic, we had family happy hours. You're reaching out to people now and having meaningful contact through a camera. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how judges treat this as a continuing issue, and whether or not that affects guys that maybe are trying to stop a relocation.
Absolutely. And like you said, there's different forms of communication, different ways to stay in touch and have that relationship. And that does go back a little bit to how the current custody schedule impacts it, because if one parent is here with me in Pennsylvania and the other's with you in Missouri, and the Pennsylvania parent wants to move to Florida, per se, anywhere, judge might say, okay, well, it's going to be a similar schedule regardless. They're still going to need to fly, and they'll still have the same kind of relationship. That probably would not actually constitute relocation at that point.
Yeah.
because it wouldn't impact the relationship. So it's definitely an
Yeah.
interesting trigger of what actually constitutes relocation.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. And, I think that when we talk about it, I think the point I wanted to make is that, guys they're standing here. There's a good fight to fight, and you have good grounds, and all of these areas you need to kind of dig into. And it's very similar to when I explain this to clients, and it's obviously different around the country and all the standards, but there's a jurisdictional piece that's called the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act. And that really dictates on where cases are filed, but there's some elements in there that I always carry over into relocation. It talks about where the child's, like, what are their connections with the state in which they're currently in, doctors, teachers, friends, those significant connections that they have none when they relocate. It's much more complicated if, mom is moving towards family or if they've split time. But if it's a new location, no connections, new school, new teachers, new friends, new doctors, new dentists, those are the kind of the defense that you put up. And I think for me, it's always, what do? You say you want to deny relocation and keep all things the same, or in the alternative, you want primary custody, or whatever the word or verbiage is in your locale. But I think that's a huge one when you think about it, is trying to dig up and create the picture of stability of all these connections, don't you think?
Absolutely. I actually have a case right now where my client, his wife, and their two children, their two sons, came here for a medical fellowship for him. They're from Oklahoma, came here for medical fellowship. They've only been here a year and a half at this point. So technically, Pennsylvania had proper jurisdiction. When his fellowship is over, and their entire plan always was for him to return to Oklahoma, for all of them to, as a family. She now is saying that she does not wish to return. We're in the process of discussing that. We might be returning now. But his fellowship is up this upcoming July, and both of their families are there. It was their plan to return, as you were saying. Family is there. He's returning for a good job. And on the flip side, their sons are only 6 and 4, so they don't have set friends per se. They don't have a set schedule. They haven't been going to the same school for 5-6 years. That would be a huge adjustment for them. That for him, he has a stronger relocation case, which is obviously a good thing for him. And due to that, not uprooting the children, it's going to be good for them to return to family, return to friends that they've had, because both sides of their family are there, both maternal and paternal.
Yeah. And I think we can get, very lax in making some assumptions here as I'm thinking through this, is that we're not always the one that's trying to stop a relocation. We may be the one that wants to relocate. And
Correct.
So that's a whole different strategy and trying to prepare. And I guess that's the question is timing. When should someone come in and meet with you, or call an attorney over at Cordell and say, hey, I need to talk strategy here so I can develop a good timeline and when I need to take action.
Absolutely. And the difficult part is, like you said, relocation can be very different. It can be, maybe I want to move. There's not a dead set time I need to by, or it could be my job told me I need to move within the month, or I'm fired. So with that, it very much so depends on when you either need or want to move, because we do need to take into account the court has a calendar that we need to go through the proper channels. And if it takes some time, it will take some time. My general rule of thumb is you won't be in front of the judge on a final relocation trial for at least 6 months in Pennsylvania following filing, because we need to file the notice. Opposing party then has 30 days to either object or agree to relocation. And then the court begins calendaring and getting the ball rolling. So it could be a month before the court even knows if they need to schedule a hearing or not.
Yeah, some jurisdictions, like I can tell you, St. Louis, it would be months and months and months and months. It's hard to get any hearing right now.
Right. So for my client I was speaking about before, where he's going to be done in July, within 6 months, we're planning on filing early December, so that the 6 months, we have plenty of time. We'll have our decision with time to prepare.
Yep.
that, you have to think ahead of the court's calendar and backlog. And I've even called the court to see how far out are you scheduling currently? What's it looking like, to get an idea of, are they moving a bit quicker? Because you also don't want to be a year before the relocation, which
Right.
granted, most people don't know that far in advance, but you don't want to be too far ahead. Or I've had judges get upset about, look, this isn't ready yet. I've seen judges get upset about that. And so
Mhm.
let's come back in a few months.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when you think about it and timing, and one of the first places to start has to be pull your judgment. No
Correct.
matter what state you're in, read what it does and says, because a lot of them will require you to provide notice and then wait before filing or while filing. Some of them, they're very different state to state. Some don't have an anti-relocation provision. So it's it. Grab your judgment, your decree, your settlement agreement, your separation agreement, and you read it or bring it into your attorney, and then really understand what you can do from there.
Exactly. And I always say the sooner you speak to someone, the better, because it's always
Yeah.
good to be prepared sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And even during the pandemic, I mean, I say months and months. I've had an occasion where, depending upon the judge I draw, I can go in and say, look, judge, we're here, school starts shortly. I need a temporary order to relocate. And I know it's kind of, you're hearing evidence twice. But it's one of those things where we got to enroll them, and there's an opportunity, but obviously you want as much time as you can get and not get into that position where you need to move and the judge is faced with a really rash decision, and they'll most of the time err on status quo and leave
Correct.
everyone where they are, and that's really the difficult part.
Correct. Exactly. So
Yeah.
definitely, I always say, if you're thinking of it, talk to someone sooner rather than later.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining. Great stuff, relocation. It can get real technical, but it's such a relevant issue right now. You hear people, relocating the job markets. You kind of pick your job if you want it. It's out there. And,
Right.
there are a lot of openings. So if that's on the horizon, it's even a possibility. It's worth a consultation with an attorney who practices exclusively in family law like we do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Scott.
Give us a call, 866-DADS-LAW. Find us on the web at CordellCordell.com. You can do a consultation in person, on the phone, or virtual, just like this. It's worth the time. We've got offices around the country in 37 plus states, including the United Kingdom. So check us out and continue to subscribe to this podcast. If you haven't done it yet, go to Apple iTunes. You can subscribe. You'll get notified when it drops twice every week. And check out our virtual town hall. That's on our YouTube channel. We'll have another one live in November. If you haven't joined yet, go to CordellCordell.com. You can find out more information about the town hall where you can log in and ask questions live of a panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys for about an hour on a topic that is important and relevant to you. So until next time, have a great week.